was not possible for us to be able to discuss such secure issues in relation to our dealings with other countries at that time.
That explanation hasn't satisfied France. It's pressuring other European nations to scuttle free trade negotiations with Australia.
One of our member states has been treated in a way that is not acceptable.
Europe has such a strong investment and such a keen interest to the security of the region.
Well, thank you for your message, but as you know, for us, transparency and loyalty are fundamental principles.
There was never going to be an easy way to not proceed with this contract. The opportunity for that call is not yet, but we'll be patient. We understand their disappointment.
The anxiety expressed in some of the reactions to the August announcement suggests that more preparatory work could have been done.
Within days, the Labor Party seems to be having an each-way bet.
This is the first bilateral between these two leaders.
The United States and Australia have always shared a partnership that is about a world order that favours freedom.
We have a big agenda to discuss today, starting with our partnership to advance our vision of a free and open Indo-Pacific.
Every nation needs to bring their highest possible ambitions to the table.
We met Congress leaders.
Of course, climate change, and thank you for your leadership in that regard.
If we want to address climate change, then we need to address the change that is necessary in developing economies.
We're taking action on climate change with new partnership toward a zero emissions shipping.
We are liberal democracies that believe in a world order that favours freedom.
Each country denying the meeting was held to counter China's rising aggression in the Indo-Pacific.
The Quad is a partner. Quad is a partner, whether it be for China or it be any other country that is in the Indo-Pacific region.
There's no doubt this visit to Washington DC has seen an era-defining pivot in Australia's foreign policy approach.
Live to my colleague, our Washington correspondent Annelise Nielsen, who's been covering the Prime Minister's trip. Annelise, a successful week for Scott Morrison there in Washington.
No doubt any analysis would have this down as a successful week, but what's going to be interesting is what happens next. This AUKUS alliance is hugely significant. As we heard there, this is going to be, I don't want to quote myself there, but this is a change in the Australian foreign policy approach that we haven't seen in generations, and it's put us really firmly in lockstep with the United States. But there's still 18 months to negotiate that contract. One of the other interesting things too has been around this discussion of climate change while Scott Morrison's been in Washington DC. Absolutely no one expected Nancy Pelosi to stand there and say that Scott Morrison's been a leader on climate change. Even his biggest supporters know that they support him because he's the guy that stood up and held a piece of coal in Parliament. So this is a discussion that is going to be had in the weeks, months, year to come, because it seems like there's been some move between Australia and the US on climate change. I would predict that there was some kind of deal made while he was here, and we're going to see some kind of announcement and a change in Australia's foreign approach to carbon emissions, climate change, possibly around the Glasgow meeting, but potentially even sooner if those negotiations have to start back when he's in Canberra.
Yeah, well, the context of this trip is really interesting, Annelise, isn't it? Because it comes ahead of the talks in November in Glasgow, those climate talks that you're alluding to there in terms of this deal potentially with Joe Biden, but also off the back of the AUKUS arrangement, you've got a situation where the Biden administration, the president, has been very forthcoming in terms of the technology, the discussion around the nuclear subs. He's in a pretty good position when he says to Scott Morrison, listen, you've got to help me with my number one priority. And he's made it clear that climate and dealing with it is a big priority of his presidency.
He has. This has been a completely clear message from the Biden administration, and the fact that he had his special climate envoy, John Kerry, in that bilateral with Scott Morrison at the United Nations, there is no way that that didn't come up, and there's no way that there hasn't been some kind of discussion with Australia. The devil is always in the details, so we have to wait and see what that is, because we weren't getting many details from Scott Morrison while he was here. But it was notable there was strong bipartisan support to meet with Scott Morrison while he was here. It's been pretty widely assessed that he had more meetings on Capitol Hill than any Australian Prime Minister would have enjoyed ever. And a lot of that was the Democrats coming to the table. China has been a unifying thing in the Senate. The only bipartisan bill that's passed through the Senate so far was a bipartisan piece of legislation that favoured American innovation technology over Chinese technology. And that was seen as a really defining point in the relations between the Democrats and the Republicans. And so they have that strong point there. But it should be noted with that meeting with Nancy Pelosi, it didn't seem like she was really across the detail of what they were exactly meeting there to say. I know I was there when they were setting up, and at one point you could hear her call out, what does ANZUS stand for? So it seems like she had a lot on her mind. That's not disparaging her. This is in the middle of potential government shutdown in the United States because they're having so many issues balancing their budget reconciliation and then this $3.5 trillion package. And so you can understand they've got their plates really full. But this is not a reason to read into the idea that there's not been some kind of deal on climate change.
Oh, absolutely. And just finally, the Quad, Annelise, that is another substantive grouping, particularly in the context of China with India, Japan, the US and Australia. What did you make of their rhetoric when it came to China, though, those four leaders?
Yeah, what was really interesting in that is it wasn't very strong on China, and the Quad has been so heavily publicised as being countering China's aggression in the region, pushing back against their growing influence. And what the language was from Joe Biden was all about just the economy, the economics of it, pushing for greater vaccine distribution among countries in the region that need more vaccine access, and none of it was really targeted at China except for the comments made by Scott Morrison, who talked about needing to protect democracy in the region, needing to protect rule of law, order, free trade. All of that's quite pointed at China, but no one was saying China. And then in the briefing right afterwards, Jen Psaki, the press secretary, pointedly said it's not a strategic security arrangement. She said the Quad alliance is all about the economy. And so they were really walking back that idea. And I think that's in the wake of the AUKUS alliance being so significant, the pressure that's put on them dealing with France because they're furious. And you're absolutely right there. This is going to be a huge influence, the French fury at G20 and also that climate summit in Glasgow.
Annelise Nielsen, live from Washington. Thanks, appreciate it.